No one invited Nico Arven to the royal ball. That was the first lie the palace told that night. The second lie was that the music had been chosen by the royal conductor. The third was that Queen Aurelia had died peacefully 6 years ago. By midnight, all three lies would begin to bleed. The ballroom of Colddawn Palace glittered beneath 1,000 candles. Gold chandeliers hung from a painted ceiling of angels and wars. Marble columns rose like pale giants around the room. Every mirror reflected silk, jewels, powdered hair, medals, and smiles polished sharp enough to cut. Tonight was not merely a ball. It was the first public celebrations since King Orlan Marwick announced his intention to remarry. The woman chosen was Lady Vespera Dawn, elegant, silver-haired, and calm, in the way only dangerous people were calm. She wore black velvet instead of bridal white, and at her throat rested a ruby necklace that had once belonged to the dead queen. No one mentioned that, no one dared. Queen Aurelia had been beloved by the people. She had walked among the poor after floods. She had opened palace kitchens during winter famine. She had played the violin in the children's ward every spring. Then, one autumn night, she collapsed in the Eastern Music Room and died before dawn. The royal physician called it a weakness of the heart. The court called it tragedy. The people called it murder. But the people whispered from outside gates. Inside the palace, silence ruled. At the far end of the ballroom, the royal orchestra sat in formal rows. Violas, cellos, flutes, horns, and harps waited beneath the conductor's raised hand. Then a young man stepped forward with a violin. He did not look like a court musician. His coat was clean but old. His boots were polished but worn at the edges. His dark hair fell too loosely around his face. A faint scar crossed his lower lip, giving him the look of someone who had learned young that words could be punished. Nico Arven lifted the violin to his shoulder. Several guests frowned. "Who is that?" whispered Countess Merrow. "A provincial musician," answered Lord Fale. "No," said an older duchess, narrowing her eyes. "He holds the bow like someone trained here." On the dais, King Orlan watched with bored politeness. Beside him, Lady Vespera smiled. But behind them, half hidden near a marble pillar, Princess Elowen went still. She was 19, the dead queen's only daughter, and she had not heard live violin music in 6 years, not since her mother's funeral. She had inherited Aurelia's dark eyes and quiet mouth, but not her ease with crowds. Elowen had become pale and careful after her mother's death, moving through court like someone trying not to disturb a room already filled with ghosts. She watched Nico's fingers settle on the strings. Something about him disturbed her. Not his face, not his clothes, his stillness. He looked like a man standing before an execution, not a performance. The conductor lifted his baton. Nico did not look at him. Instead, he looked directly at the king. Then he played one note. A single note. Soft, low, almost tender. The room did not freeze at once. At first, people only quieted. The note stretched through the ballroom like a thread pulled from an old wound. Then came the second note. Then the third. Princess Elowen's breath caught. No, impossible. The melody was simple at first. A lullaby shape, delicate and sorrowful. Then it turned unexpectedly. It's rising into a phrase that seemed to reach for something lost and refused to let it vanish. Elowen gripped the pillar. She knew that song. Everyone closest to the royal family knew that song. But no one had heard it since Queen Aurelia died. It was called The Last Rose of Calborn, a private melody. A song Aurelia had composed herself. She never wrote it down. She played it only in 3 places: the East Music Room, the Royal Nursery, and the King's private chapel. When she died, the King ordered every mention of it removed. "The Queen's memory must rest," he said. But as Nico played, Memory rose. The Queen's former ladies began to weep. An old footman near the wall dropped his tray. The royal physician, Dr. Holden saw, went white. King Orlan stood. The music continued. Now the entire ballroom understood something was wrong. Lady Vespera's smile did not move, but her eyes changed. Princess Elowen stepped forward without realizing it. Nico's bow moved faster now, pulling grief from the strings with unbearable control. The song filled the hall. Not loud, not theatrical, but intimate. It made the massive palace feel suddenly like a child's room after midnight. Then Nico changed the ending. Elowen knew he changed it because her mother had always ended the song with a soft descending phrase, like a kiss on the forehead. But Nico added 4 notes, 4 hidden notes, a code. Elowen stopped breathing. Her mother had taught her that code when she was 7. If ever music must carry a secret. Queen Aurelia had whispered, smiling as though they were playing a game. Listen for the wrong ending. The 4 notes meant, I was silenced. Elowen's hand flew to her mouth. King Orlan descended from the dais. Stop! Nico continued playing. The guards along the walls shifted. The orchestra sat frozen. No one dared join. No one dared interrupt. The king's voice became dangerous. I said, stop! Nico played the final phrase. This time he looked at Princess Elowen and added 4 more notes. The child must know. The bow lifted. Silence crashed into the ballroom. For a moment no one moved. Then Lady Vespera clapped once. Slowly, a single clap. Every head turned toward her. How moving, she said. A dead queen's song at a betrothal celebration. How brave. Or how foolish. King Orlan stared at Nico. What is your name? The musician lowered his violin. Nico Arvand, Your Majesty. Who taught you that melody? Nico did not answer. The king's jaw tightened. I asked you a question, and I heard it. A gasp moved through the court. No common musician spoke so to a king. Lady Vespera's eyes sharpened with interest. Princess Elowen could not look away. King Orlan raised one hand. 2 guards moved toward Nico. Then the ballroom doors opened. An old woman entered, not a noblewoman, not a servant. She wore a plain dark cloak, wet from rain, and leaned on a carved cane. Her face was lined, her hair white, her eyes black and alive. At the sight of her, Dr. Holden stumbled backward. The old woman saw him, smiled, then turned to the king. I taught him, the room began whispering. King Orlan's face changed, only for a second. But Elowen saw it. Fear. The old woman walked forward, slow but unbowed. Lady Vespera said softly, Who let this woman in? No one answered. The old woman stopped beside Nico. My name is Madame Sephira Vey, she said. I was music mistress to Queen Aurelia. Princess Elowen's heart struck hard. Sephira Vey was supposed to be dead. Elowen remembered being told that. 2 months after her mother's death, the palace announced that Sephira had fallen ill and died in the countryside. But here she stood, alive. The king's voice lowered. You have grown bold in old age. Sephira looked at him. No, Majesty. Merely tired of living long enough to regret silence. Lady Vespera stepped forward. This is offensive theatre. Remove them. But King Orlan did not move. His eyes remained on Sephira. Why have you come? Sephira lifted her chin. Because tonight you place another woman in Aurelia's jewels. Because tonight the court is asked to dance over a grave that was never properly closed. And because this boy carries the last music your queen left behind. Nico's face tightened. The king looked at him again. What boy? Sephira smiled sadly. The one you failed to find. The ballroom went silent. Elowen felt cold move through her body. Failed to find? Lady Vespera's voice sharpened. Enough riddles. Saphira looked directly at Princess Elowen. Your Highness, your mother did not die before speaking. Elowen stepped forward. My mother spoke? Yes. To whom? Saphira placed a hand on Nico's shoulder. To him. The entire court stared at Nico. He looked down, as if the weight of the room had finally become too much. Elowen whispered, Who are you? Nico lifted his eyes to hers. I was in the East music room the night she died. King Orlan shouted, Seize him! The guards rushed, but Nico raised the violin again and struck one sharp note. From the gallery above, hidden figures stood. Not assassins. Not soldiers. Musicians. Old royal musicians dismissed after Aurelia's death. They lifted their instruments, and together they played the dead queen's song. The ballroom erupted. Guests screamed. Guards hesitated. The melody thundered from above, no longer a lullaby but an accusation. And in the chaos, Saphira grabbed Princess Elowen's wrist and whispered, If you want to know why your mother died, follow the song. Princess Elowen had been raised never to run in palace halls. Queens walked, princesses glided. Girls who ran looked frightened, and royal girls were never allowed to look frightened. That night, Elowen ran. She followed Madame Saphira through a side passage behind the musicians' gallery, while the ballroom behind them dissolved into panic and music. Nico ran ahead, violin clutched to his chest. His face was pale, but his steps were certain. You know these passages, Elowen said breathlessly. Nico looked back. I learned them before I learned proper prayers. Who are you? Not here. They turned sharply into a narrow stairwell. Behind them, guards shouted. Saphira moved with surprising speed for an old woman. This way. The stairs led down to the eastern wing. Elowen had not entered that part of the palace in 6 years, not since the night her mother died. The eastern music room stood at the end of a long corridor lined with covered portraits. The doors were locked with a brass chain. Nico pulled a key from beneath his collar. Elowen stared at it. That key was buried with my mother. No, he said. A copy was buried. He unlocked the door. The room smelled of dust, old wood, and violets. The violet scent nearly broke Elowen. Her mother had worn violet oil in her hair. The music room looked untouched. The piano stood near the window. Music stands lined the wall. The Queen's favourite chair sat beside the hearth. Her violin case rested on a velvet-covered table. Elowen stepped inside slowly. I used to sit there, she whispered, pointing to the rug near the piano. She would play while I pretended not to be sleepy. Nico said nothing. That silence annoyed her. Why did you play her song tonight? Because no one listens until a secret becomes public. My mother's song is not a weapon. No, Nico said. It is a key. Saphira closed the doors behind them and slid a bolt into place. Elowen turned. What do you mean? Saphira walked to the Queen's violin case. Your mother did write the song down, not on paper. In the violin itself. She opened the case. Inside lay Queen Aurelia's violin, dark wood, silver fittings. A tiny rose carved near the bridge. Elowen reached toward it, then stopped. Her hand trembled. Nico noticed, but did not speak. Saphira lifted the violin carefully and turned it over. Beneath the chin rest was a hidden seam. She pressed it. A thin compartment opened. Inside was a folded strip of silk. Elowen's chest tightened. Saphira handed it to her. The silk was faded ivory, covered in musical notations stitched with dark thread. At first it looked like the melody Nico had played. Then Elowen saw the wrong ending. The code notes. Not one message, many. Her mother had hidden words inside music. Elowen read slowly. If I die, do not believe the heart. The physician lies. The ruby necklace is proof. The boy heard everything. Elowen must not trust the second bride. The silk fell from Elowen's hands. Nico caught it before it touched the floor. "The second bride," Elowen whispered. "Lady Vespera." Saphira nodded. "Your mother knew." "Knew what?" Nico answered. "That Lady Vespera was already in the palace before the queen died." Elowen turned on him. "That is impossible. Vespera came to court 2 years later." "No," he said. "She came under another name." Saphira's face was grim. "She was your mother's companion for 6 months. Called herself Lady Renna of Westmere. Always soft-spoken. Always helpful. Always near the Queen's tea, jewels, letters and music." Elowen's stomach twisted. "What happened to her?" "She vanished the night Aurelia died." Elowen looked toward the locked door. "And returned as Lady Vespera Dawn." "Yes," the princess shook her head. "My father would know." Saphira's eyes hardened. "Your father knew more than he admitted." Those words struck like a slap. Elowen stepped back. "No," Nico said quietly. "Princess, no. You do not get to walk into my life with a song and accuse my father." His expression changed. "I am not accusing him because I hate him. I am accusing him because I saw him." The room went still. Elowen stared at him. "What?" Nico looked toward the piano as if the memory lived there. "I was 11. A page boy assigned to carry messages in the Eastern Wing. I was in that passage." He pointed to a narrow servant door behind the curtains. "I heard voices, the Queen, the physician, Lady Renna, and the King." Elowen could barely breathe. "What did they say?" Nico's jaw tightened. "Your mother said she would not sign the decree." "What decree?" Saphira answered. "The one naming Vespera's family as guardians of the northern provinces. It would have given them military power." Nico continued. "The king said she was making enemies. She said the enemies were already inside the room." Elowen closed her eyes. Her mother would have said that. Softly, clearly, dangerously. Nico's voice lowered. "Then she saw me hiding. She did not expose me. She began playing the last rose. But she changed the ending. I knew music, not code then. I only understood later that she was trying to leave a message." "What happened next?" Nico looked at her. "Lady Renna gave her wine. Elowen felt ill. She drank it." "No," she knocked it away. Relief lasted only a second. Then Dr. Saw took out a vial. Saphira looked down. Nico's voice became rough. "I ran." The confession filled the room. Elowen stared at him. "You ran?" "I was 11. You left her?" His face hardened, but pain burned beneath it. "Yes." Elowen's anger rose because anger was easier than grief. "You played her song in front of the whole court, but when she was alive, you ran." Nico flinched. Saphira said, "Princess, no, he wants truth. There is truth." Nico looked at the floor. "You are right." The answer emptied the anger from her too quickly. He did not defend himself. He did not excuse it. "I ran," he said again. "Then I told the guard. By the time anyone came, the queen was dead. The guard, I told, disappeared. I was dragged from the palace before dawn. Saphira found me 3 days later." Elowen's voice trembled. "Why did you not come sooner?" Saphira answered this time. "Because everyone who knew died or vanished. Because you were a child under your father's control. Because proof was scattered. And accusation without proof is only another death sentence." Elowen picked up the silk again. "The ruby necklace is proof. The ruby at Vespera's throat. Her mother's necklace." "What proof?" Saphira said. "The largest ruby opens." Elowen stared. "It is a locket, not for a portrait. For poison." Nico nodded. "Queen Aurelia discovered it. The ruby chamber held powder residue. She meant to expose Vespera at council." Elowen remembered Vespera wearing it tonight. Her mother's jewel. Her mother's proof, around the throat of the woman who may have helped kill her. A fist struck the door. All three turned. Elawan! King Orlan's voice boomed from the corridor. Open this door! The princess froze. Saphira whispered, Do not answer. Another strike. The door shook. Elawan, they are lying to you. Elawan stared at the door. A child inside her wanted to run to him. Her father. The man who had held her after nightmares. The man who had sat silent at her mother's funeral, with one hand on her shoulder. The man who now stood on the other side of a locked door, while her mother's hidden accusation lay in her hands. King Orlan's voice softened. Daughter, please. That was worse. Nico moved slightly between her and the door. Elawan noticed. Do not. He stepped back at once. Good. She was tired of men placing themselves between her and answers. She walked to the door but did not open it. Did you know Vespera was Lady Renna? Silence. Then the king said, Open the door. Answer me. Elawan, did you know? A long pause. Then, not at first. The words cut her breath away. Not denial. Not at first. Behind her, Saphira closed her eyes. Elawan pressed her hand to the wood. When did you know? The king's voice was low. Too late. For whom? No answer. Elawan whispered, For mother. The door exploded inward. A guard had broken the lock. King Orlan entered with 4 soldiers behind him. His face was pale with anger and something that might have been shame. His eyes fell on the silk in Elawan's hand, then on the open violin compartment, then on Nico. You, he said. Nico lifted his chin. Yes, you should have stayed dead. Elawan turned sharply. Dead? Nico's face went still. Saphira whispered, Majesty, you condemn yourself. But the king was no longer listening. Elawan, come here. She did not move. Now, for the first time in her life, Princess Elawan looked at her father and said, No. The room went silent. The king's expression hardened. Lady Vespera appeared behind him in the broken doorway. She wore the ruby necklace. Her smile was calm. There, she said softly, the dead queen's final trick. She has turned your daughter against you with a song. Elawan's eyes dropped to the ruby. Vespera noticed. And for the first time that night, her hand rose to her throat, too late. Nico moved first. He swung his violin bow like a blade and struck the necklace clasp. The ruby necklace snapped loose and fell across the floor. A guard lunged for him. Elawan threw the queen's violin case at the guard's knees. He crashed down. Saphira snatched the necklace and hurled it toward Elawan. Run! Elawan caught it. Then Nico grabbed the silk message, seized her hand, and pulled her through the servant door behind the curtains. Behind them, Lady Vespera screamed, Do not let them reach the chapel. The chapel beneath Calbourne Palace had not been used since Queen Aurelia's funeral. Officially, it was closed for restoration. In truth, it had been locked because too many servants claimed they heard violin music there after midnight. Nico led Elawan through the servant passages with the memory of someone who had survived by knowing which walls had gaps and which floors betrayed footsteps. Elawan ran with the ruby necklace clutched in one hand and her mother's silk message in the other. Behind them, guards thundered through the palace. Why the chapel? She gasped. Your mother played there the day before she died. How do you know? Because she sent me there with a note. They reached a narrow spiral staircase. Nico pushed open a hidden panel. Cold air washed over them. The chapel was dark except for moonlight through stained glass. At the altar stood a statue of Saint Calia, patron of music and truth. Dust covered the pews. The royal tomb doors stood sealed beneath the eastern arch. Elawan stepped inside. Her mother had lain there. White flowers, black silk, a crown placed on a coffin no one let her open. She had been 13, too young to demand answers, old enough to know something had been stolen. Nico crossed to the altar. The note told me if I ever found the ruby, bring it here. What does it do? I do not know. Wonderful. Despite the terror, Nico almost smiled. Almost. Elowen looked down at the ruby necklace. The largest stone sat in the center, surrounded by gold leaves. She pressed the setting. Nothing. Nico took it gently. May I? She let him. He turned it over, examined the clasp, then pressed a tiny hinge behind the ruby. The stone opened. Inside was not powder, not poison, a rolled strip of paper. Elowen's hands shook as she took it. Her mother's handwriting. If this reaches Elowen, then I failed to live long enough to speak. The words blurred. Nico looked away to give her privacy, but she read aloud because the truth had been hidden long enough. My daughter, I was not killed for love, jealousy, or court rivalry. I was killed because I discovered a treaty your father signed in secret. He did not intend my death. I believe that. But he allowed those who wanted me silent to remain near me because he feared civil war more than he trusted truth. Remember this. Cowardice can murder without holding the blade. Elowen stopped. The chapel seemed to tilt. Her father had not poured poison, but he had protected those who did. That was almost worse, she continued. Lady Vespera, then called Renna, carried the poison. Dr. Saw prepared it. Lord Calvec approved the payment. The king knew after the fact and concealed it to preserve the Northern Alliance. He reads this. Let him know I loved the man he was before the crown taught him fear. But I will not forgive the king who buried me for peace. Elowen pressed the letter to her chest. A sound came from the chapel entrance. King Orlan stood there, alone, no guards, no Vespera. Only the king, older than he had looked an hour ago. Elowen, he said. She lifted the letter. Is it true? He did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. Her voice broke. You knew after. The king closed his eyes. Yes. Nico went rigid. Saphira emerged from the side shadows, breathless, having reached the chapel another way. She stared at the king with hatred kept alive for 6 years. You let them call it a weak heart. The king's face crumpled. I was told the northern armies would rebel. I was told the provinces would burn. I had a daughter to protect, a kingdom to hold. Elowen stepped closer. You had a wife to bury honestly. His eyes filled. Yes. And you chose the crown. His voice was hoarse. I chose wrongly. The simplicity of it nearly destroyed her. She wanted him to defend himself more. Wanted him to be a monster. Monsters are easier to hate than weak men who know they failed. Then Lady Vespera entered behind him with soldiers. So touching, she said. The king confesses just in time to lose everything. Orlan turned. Vespera. She smiled. Do not look so surprised. You taught me the cost of silence. Dr. Holden Saw stood behind her, trembling. Lord Calvec, the royal minister, stood beside the guards. All the names from Aurelia's letter had gathered in the chapel. Vespera looked at Elowen. Give me the letter. No. Child, you have no idea what rests on that paper. Yes, Elowen said. My mother's voice. Vespera's face hardened. Your mother was beloved because she could afford goodness. Some of us had to survive politics instead. Saphira spat. You poisoned a queen. I removed a woman who would have dragged the kingdom into war over moral purity. Nico stepped forward. You murdered her because she exposed you. Vespera's eyes landed on him. And you ran. The words hit. Nico flinched. Elowen saw it. Then, to his surprise, she stepped beside him. He was a child. So were you, Vespera said. And still, here you are, trying to play queen because a dead woman wrote you a sad little song. That was Vespera's mistake. The chapel went silent. Elowen looked up, not at her father, not at Nico, at the statue of Saint Kalia. Then she walked to the altar and took up her mother's violin. Nico whispered. Princess! Elowen had not played in 6 years. Her hands trembled, but she placed the violin beneath her chin. Her mother had taught her, small fingers, wrong notes. Laughter. Again, little star. Music forgives, but only if you return to it. Elowen drew the bow across the strings. The first note cracked. Vespera laughed. Then Elowen played the second note, stronger. Then the third. Nico understood and lifted his violin. Saphira began humming beneath them. Together, they played the last rose of Calborn. But this time, Elowen added the code notes. Not hidden, clear, accusing. I was silenced. The crown knew. The guilty stand here. From outside the chapel came another sound. Instruments. The dismissed musicians had followed. Then voices. Servants, nobles, guests from the ball. The chapel doors widened as the court gathered, drawn by the song. Lady Vespera turned sharply. No, too late. The ball had followed the music. Every guest now saw the Queen's daughter standing before the altar with Aurelia's violin, the king in tears, Vespera pale, Dr. sore trembling, Lord Calvec backing toward the wall, and the letter in Elowen's hand. The song ended. Elowen turned to the court. My mother did not die of a weak heart. No one spoke. She left proof, names, witnesses. Her song was not mourning. It was testimony. Dr. Saw collapsed to his knees. I only prepared what I was ordered to prepare. Lord Calvec shouted, Silence, fool! That was enough. The court erupted. Vespera tried to run, but Nico stepped into her path. She slapped him hard enough to split his lip. He did not move. Still running, she hissed. He touched the blood at his mouth. No, he said. Not anymore. The guards looked to the king. King Orlan looked at Vespera, then at his daughter, then at the coffin doors beneath the arch. His voice, when it came, was broken but royal. Arrest them. Vespera stared. You would destroy yourself, he answered. I already did. The guards seized her. Dr. Saw wept. Lord Calvec cursed. And Elowen stood very still, because victory felt nothing like she had imagined. It did not feel bright. It felt heavy. Like, finally, lifting a coffin lid, and finding the truth had been breathing beneath it the entire time. Days later, the kingdom learned that Queen Aurelia had been murdered. Weeks later, Lady Vespera, Dr. Saw and Lord Calvec faced formal inquiry before the full council. King Orlan abdicated his direct authority pending judgment. He did not flee. That was the only dignity left to him. Princess Elowen became regent of Calborn, not with triumph, with trembling hands. Her first royal order was to reopen the Eastern Music Room. Her second was to restore every musician dismissed after her mother's death. Her third was to have the last rose of Calborn written into the royal archive, not as a lullaby, but as evidence. As for Nico Arvand, the court did not know what to do with him. Some called him coward, some called him hero. He accepted neither. When Elowen found him 3 evenings later in the chapel, he was standing before Queen Aurelia's tomb with his violin at his side. I owe her my life, he said. Elowen stood beside him. You were 11. I still ran. You came back. Too late. Yes, she said, but not uselessly. He looked at her. She held his gaze. It was not forgiveness exactly. Not yet, but it was a bridge. Will you play? She asked. For the court. For her. He lifted the violin. This time he played the Queen's song softly, the way a child might have heard it from the hallway, the way a dying woman might have hidden truth inside beauty, the way a kingdom might learn, too late, that music can remember what power tries to bury. Elowen listened until the final note faded. Then she added the last phrase herself on her mother's violin. Not the code. Not the accusation. The original ending. The lullaby ending. the one that felt like a hand brushing hair from a sleeping child's brow. And for the first time since Queen Aurelia died, the song ended in peace. Years later, people still spoke of that royal ball. They said every guest froze when the violinist played the dead queen's song. They said, the princess followed the melody and found the truth. They said a kingdom was shaken by 4 hidden notes. But those who were there knew the deeper thing. The song did not bring down the guilty because it was beautiful. It brought them down because one boy remembered what he had run from. One daughter finally listened to what grief had hidden. And one murdered queen understood that even if they buried her body, silenced her witnesses, and locked her music, alita nost, a song can wait. A song can survive. A song can enter a ballroom 6 years later, dressed as entertainment, and make every liar in the palace forget how to breathe.